betrayal rarely comes from enemies. Most often, it wears the face of the one who shared your mother's womb. When a cruel sister stole the very essence of her twin to deceive a king, she forgot one absolute truth. You can deceive a man, but you cannot lie to a wolf. In the brutal, frostbitten lands of the Ethgard kingdom, the year 1142 was marked by harsh winters and even harsher laws. Within the towering stone walls of the Hastings estate, power was the only currency that mattered. Lord Arthur Hastings, the ruling alpha of the southern reaches, was a man of ruthless ambition. He demanded perfection, strength, and dominance. He received all three in his firstborn twin, Priscilla. She was a fiery, commanding alpha female, the golden child of the family, blessed with striking beauty and a heart as cold as the cobblestones of the courtyard. But nature has a twisted sense of humor. Born only minutes after Priscilla was her identical twin, Cordelia. Where Priscilla was fire, Cordelia was a gentle, yielding stream. To Lord Arthur's eternal disgust, Cordelia did not present as an alpha, nor even a beta, but as a submissive omega. In the highborn werewolf society of the Middle Ages, an omega born into a ruling alpha family was considered a stain upon their honor, a genetic failure to be hidden away. From the moment she presented at 16, Cordelia was stripped of her title, her fine gowns, and her dignity. She was banished to the scullery, forced to scrub floors alongside the lowest human servants, dressed in rags, and subjected to the daily violent whims of both her father and her sister. Despite her miserable existence, Cordelia possessed something Priscilla never could, something that drove the alpha twin mad with jealousy: her scent. A werewolf scent is their soul laid bare. Priscilla smelled of sharp musk and burnt wood, intimidating, yet completely devoid of warmth. Cordelia, however, carried the fragrance of winter jasmine, crushed pine needles, and fresh rain. It was an intoxicating, incredibly rare omega pheromone that promised peace, fertility, and an unbreakable bond. It was a scent worthy of a king. And a king was exactly who was coming. King Cedric of the Northern Vales, the apex alpha of the entire Dominion, had begun a royal tour in search of his Luna. Cedric was a terrifying figure, a warlord who had united the warring territories through sheer, brutal force. He was feared far more for the feral beast that lived beneath his skin than for his diplomacy. Now 30 years old, he had still not found his fated mate, and his inner wolf had grown restless, aggressive, and dangerously unpredictable. When word reached the Hastings estate that the king's royal carriage would arrive before the next full moon, Lord Arthur immediately recognized the opportunity before him. If he could marry his golden daughter, Priscilla, to the king, the Hastings family would hold absolute power. There was only one problem. Fated mates were chosen by the moon goddess and recognized instantly by their unique scent. 3 days before the king's arrival, an advanced scouting party reached the estate. Among them traveled the royal seer, an ancient blind wolf capable of reading the threads of fate. As Cordelia struggled across the courtyard carrying a heavy bucket of slop, the old seer suddenly inhaled sharply. His trembling, gnarled finger pointed directly toward the ragged servant girl. "Winter jasmine and crushed pine," he whispered with deep reverence. "The king's salvation, his fated Luna, is here." Watching from a nearby balcony, Priscilla heard every single word. A poisonous wave of envy twisted inside her heart. She refused to let the family's greatest disgrace ascend to the throne while she stood beneath her as nothing more than a subject. That very night, Priscilla secretly traveled beyond the estate to the murky bogs, where an exiled witch and disgraced apothecary known as Mother Agatha lived in isolation. In exchange for a heavy pouch filled with solid gold coins, the witch revealed an ancient and forbidden ritual. It was a dark spell of transference, a twisted form of blood alchemy capable of siphoning the ethereal essence from one wolf and binding it permanently to another. But the ritual came with one terrible condition. The victim had to remain under constant subjugation. Under the cover of darkness, Priscilla and 2 loyal guards dragged Cordelia from her straw cot inside the scullery. Ignoring her terrified cries, they hauled her into the cold, damp dungeons beneath the manor. There, Priscilla forced a vile, sludge-like potion down Cordelia's throat. The poison deadened her scent glands, stole her voice, and suppressed her inner wolf into a near catatonic sleep. As Cordelia choked and wept, helpless beneath the dark magic, Priscilla sliced a deep wound across her sister's palm with a silver blade. She carefully collected Cordelia's essence inside a crystal vial and mixed it with Mother Agatha's enchanted oils. When Priscilla rubbed the mixture onto her pulse points, the sharp scent of burnt would completely vanish. In its place bloomed the irresistible fragrance of winter jasmine, crushed pine, and fresh rain. 2 days later, King Cedric rode into the Hastings courtyard. The earth seemed to tremble beneath the hooves of his enormous black destrier. Clad in dark steel armor and heavy furs, the towering king surveyed the welcoming party with piercing amber eyes. Lord Arthur bowed deeply before presenting his prized daughter. The instant Cedric dismounted, the wind shifted. The scent struck him like a physical blow. His human heart skipped a beat. Deep within him, the massive feral beast surged forward, clawing violently at his mind. Mate! Cedric's eyes immediately locked onto Priscilla, who stood gracefully in a deep emerald silk gown, completely surrounded by the stolen fragrance. Without hesitation, he crossed the courtyard in 3 powerful strides, ignoring the whispers spreading throughout his court. He wrapped one arm around Priscilla's waist and buried his face against the side of her neck, inhaling deeply. The scent was there, felt perfect. "You are mine," Cedric growled, his deep voice vibrating through the chests of everyone present. Priscilla smiled triumphantly over his broad shoulder. "And I am yours, my king." Far beneath their feet, deep inside the freezing darkness of the dungeon, Cordelia suddenly felt the horrifying snap of the mate bond locking into place. A cosmic thread connected her soul to the king's. But because of the suppressants and her sister's theft, that sacred connection became horribly twisted. Cordelia screamed. Dark liquid spilled from her lips as unbearable pain ripped through her chest. Broken, bleeding, and completely alone, she collapsed into the darkness while, far above, the kingdom celebrated the beginning of a royal love story built upon betrayal. Part 2. The King's Doubt. The royal wedding was to be held at the king's ancestral seat, the formidable Wyvern Keep, perched high among the snow-capped mountains of the north. Lord Arthur was ecstatic. His chest swelled with the pride of a man who believed he had successfully bought the crown. Priscilla was showered with jewels, silks, and the admiration of an entire kingdom that believed she was their destined queen. But the illusion was fragile. Mother Agatha's potion was never meant to be permanent. Priscilla's natural alpha scent constantly fought to resurface, forcing her to apply a fresh mixture of Cordelia's stolen essence every single morning. To ensure an uninterrupted supply, Priscilla convinced Lord Arthur that she wanted her pitiful, mute sister to accompany her as a personal handmaiden, claiming it would remind her to remain humble. The truth was far darker. She needed Cordelia alive. She needed her as a living source from which she could continue harvesting the stolen essence. Cordelia was dragged from the dungeon, dressed in a coarse wool gown, and forced to travel with the royal procession to Wyvern Keep. Her life inside the great fortress became even more terrifying. She was confined inside a cramped, windowless stone closet connected to Priscilla's luxurious bedchamber. Every evening, after locking the heavy oak door, Priscilla would draw her silver knife and collect whatever she required. A lock of Cordelia's hair, tears, or another vial of her precious essence to prepare the following day's enchanted perfume. If Cordelia cried or resisted, she was beaten mercilessly. The potion fooled King Cedric's human senses perfectly. He adored Priscilla. He lavished her with priceless gifts and honored her with a seat beside him during meetings of the Royal War Council. Yet as the weeks slowly passed and the wedding day drew closer, something deep inside the king continued to rebel. It began with his inner wolf. In werewolf law, the man and the beast are 2 halves of the same soul. The man sees beauty. The beast feels truth. Whenever Cedric stood near Priscilla, his human mind was enchanted by the sweet fragrance of winter jasmine. But every time he touched her, his wolf recoiled. There were no sparks, no warmth, No peace. None of the signs that every fated pair was destined to share. Instead, the beast paced endlessly inside his mind, snarling and refusing to submit. One evening, Cedric stood before the roaring fireplace inside his private solar, unable to rest. His amber eyes were bloodshot from endless sleepless nights. "Something is wrong, Tobias," Cedric admitted quietly. "When I am away from her, I crave her scent. But whenever I hold her, my beast bares its teeth. It refuses to claim her." Tobias, the king's loyal beta and closest friend, frowned thoughtfully. "She is an alpha, my king. Two powerful alphas rarely mate. Perhaps your wolves are simply clashing." Cedric slowly shook his head. "No." His voice dropped into a dangerous growl. "It isn't dominance. My wolf behaves as though there is a complete stranger standing where my mate should be." Priscilla noticed the growing distance between them. Whenever she attempted to draw close or seduce the king, Cedric instinctively stepped back. His eyes flashed brilliant gold as his beast resisted every touch. Fear settled deep inside her heart. The deception was beginning to crack. Desperate to preserve her lie, Priscilla doubled the amount of enchanted perfume she wore each day. She soaked her dresses. She covered her skin. She drowned herself in Cordelia's stolen essence. To create enough of the potion, she became even more brutal toward her imprisoned sister. Cordelia was bled more frequently than ever before. Her body grew weaker with every passing day. Her skin became pale. Dark circles settled beneath her exhausted eyes. She constantly hovered on the edge of unconsciousness. The only moments of relief she ever experienced came when Priscilla ordered her to clean the royal stables or fetch water while attending court. Although Cordelia remained silent, the servants quietly admired her. Priscilla had threatened to cut out her tongue if she ever spoke to another soul, so Cordelia never uttered a word. Yet her gentle actions, quiet kindness, and sorrowful eyes spoke louder than any voice ever could. The breaking point arrived 1 week before the royal wedding. A massive blizzard surrounded Wyvern Keep, trapping the entire royal court within its towering stone walls. That afternoon, Priscilla ordered Cordelia into the castle's deep wine cellars to retrieve a rare vintage intended for her luxurious evening bath. The ancient stone staircase was slick with moisture. Weak from constant blood loss and severe malnutrition, Cordelia missed a single step. She fell. The heavy bottles shattered around her. Sharp glass sliced across her hands and forearms. She collapsed onto the freezing stone floor, gasping in pain as crimson blood mixed with the spilled wine. For the first time in weeks, the suppressants inside her exhausted body weakened. Only for a single fleeting moment, her true scent escaped. Pure, untainted, powerful, winter jasmine, crushed pine, fresh rain. 3 floors above, King Cedric was holding court in the great hall. Without warning, he froze. The goblet in his hand shattered as his grip tightened. His head snapped toward the servant corridors. This scent, it wasn't the artificial perfume Priscilla wore. This fragrance was alive, carried warmth, carried fear, carried pain. Inside his mind, his wolf exploded with a deafening roar. "Mate! Our mate is bleeding!" Before anyone could react, the beast seized complete control. Cedric's bones cracked as the shift threatened to overtake him before the entire court. His eyes blazed with brilliant golden light. With a terrifying roar that shook the chandeliers above, the king charged from the great hall. Heavy boots splintered wooden floorboards beneath every stride as he sprinted toward the scent. "My king!" Tobias shouted, drawing his sword as he raced after him, believing an assassin had infiltrated the castle. Deep below, fighting through the agonizing pain in her bleeding arms, Cordelia struggled to her feet. Trembling violently, she stumbled behind a massive row of ancient oak barrels, pressing herself into the darkness. She covered her mouth with both hands and buried her face against the cold stone wall, desperately trying to hide her scent. A heartbeat later, the heavy iron door exploded inward. King Cedric burst into the cellar with such force that its hinges ripped free from the wall. His chest rose and fell with powerful breaths. His fangs were fully extended. His glowing golden eyes swept across the dimly lit room. She is here. His inner wolf roared inside his mind. Our soul is here. Step by step, Cedric followed the trail of shattered glass and spilled wine. Finally, he stopped where Cordelia had fallen. Slowly, the king lowered himself to one knee. His massive hand brushed across the crimson-stained stone floor. He brought the blood to his nose and inhaled. The moment Cordelia's true essence reached his senses, a violent shudder passed through his entire body. Everything suddenly became clear. The scent before him was alive. It was warm. It resonated with his very soul. His beast, which had been restless for weeks, finally became calm. For the first time since arriving at Wyvern Keep, purred. The perfume Priscilla wore upstairs was nothing more than a hollow imitation, a stolen shadow of the real scent. Cedric slowly rose to his feet and followed the fading trail deeper into the cellar. Only a few more steps, only one more turn around the towering barrels, and he would finally find the owner of the scent his soul had searched for. Before he could reach the shadows where Cordelia hid, a frantic voice echoed down the stone staircase. "Cedric, my love, what has happened?" Priscilla rushed into the cellar, drenched in so much of the stolen perfume that it immediately overwhelmed the air. The artificial fragrance smothered the last traces of Cordelia's fading scent. She hurried to Cedric and wrapped both arms tightly around his waist. "You frightened me," she said breathlessly. "The guards said you ran away like a madman." Cedric remained perfectly still. His glowing eyes slowly shifted from the blood-covered floor to the woman clinging to him. The human within him wanted to comfort his fiancée, but his wolf had taken control, and the beast was staring at Priscilla, not with love, not with affection, but with the cold, calculating gaze of a predator that had finally realized it had been deceived. The wolf had never accepted her, and never would. As Cedric silently looked into Priscilla's eyes, he made a terrifying vow. He would uncover the owner of the true scent. And when he did, anyone responsible for hiding her would pay the ultimate price. The mind of a king could master politics, but the heart of a wolf could never be fooled. After several long moments, Cedric forced his eyes to fade from glowing gold back to their natural gray. He calmly wrapped his heavy fur-lined cloak around Priscilla's shoulders. "I heard a disturbance," he said evenly. "Perhaps an intruder. The guards will search the castle. Return to your chambers. It isn't safe here." Relieved, Priscilla smiled. She believed the danger had passed. Without another word, she allowed the servants to escort her back upstairs. The moment she disappeared from sight, Cedric's expression changed completely. He never called for the guards. Instead, he quietly summoned Tobias. Along with him came the most brilliant physician in the kingdom, Dr. Thomas Laker, renowned throughout the Western Territories for his controversial studies of blood alchemy and ancient pheromone extraction. The elderly physician arrived carrying a leather satchel filled with delicate instruments. Beneath the flickering light of a single torch, Dr. Laker carefully collected the mixture of blood and spilled wine from the stone floor into a crystal vial. Cedric folded his arms across his chest. "Find me the truth hidden within this scent," he ordered, his voice carrying the restrained growl of his beast. "For if my wolf is right, the woman sleeping in my chambers is only a phantom, and my true queen is bleeding somewhere in the shadows." For the next 2 agonizing days, Cedric played the role of the devoted groom. He smiled beside Priscilla during royal banquets. He endured Lord Arthur's endless celebrations. He accepted every toast with calm dignity. But behind those composed eyes, the king watched everything. He noticed how Priscilla refused to let anyone enter her private chambers. He noticed the frightened servant girl who always followed several steps behind her, the silent handmaiden, the frail young woman who never raised her head, never spoke, and always seemed covered in fresh bruises. Every instinct inside Cedric's soul told him the same thing. The truth was walking only a few steps behind the woman pretending to be his mate. He only needed proof, and proof was finally on its way. On the eve of the royal coronation, Dr. Thomas Laker requested an urgent private audience with King Cedric inside the royal war room. The elderly physician's face was pale. His hands trembled as he placed the glowing crystal vial upon the great oak table. "My king," Dr. Laker began gravely. "The blood recovered from the cellar belongs to a purebred Omega, but it has been horribly poisoned. It contains deadly suppressants, belladonna, monkshood, and a powerful neutralizing agent. Someone has been forcefully suppressing this Omega's inner wolf while repeatedly siphoning her pheromones." He paused before delivering the final verdict. "It is an ancient parasitic transference ritual." The room fell silent. Cedric's blood turned to ice. Every missing piece suddenly fell into place. The strange unease, his wolf's constant rejection, the stolen scent, the silent, battered handmaiden, Priscilla's mysterious behavior, and finally, her identical twin. Without another word, Cedric quietly left the war room. Using his heightened alpha senses, he stood silently outside Priscilla's private chambers, carefully masking his own scent. Through the thick oak door, he heard everything. A heavy body struck the stone floor. A muffled cry of pain followed. Then Priscilla's cold, venomous voice echoed through the room. "Stop crying, you pathetic runt. The potion is fading too quickly. I need more. Just one more extraction. Tomorrow, the king will bite me before the altar. Once he marks me, the mate bond will be sealed forever. His beast will have no choice but to submit. And when I become queen, I'll finally have your throat slit and throw your body to the boars. I'm tired of looking at you." Cedric's hands slowly closed into fists. His knuckles split open beneath the pressure. Drops of royal blood struck the stone floor. Inside his mind, his wolf erupted into a deafening roar. It demanded blood. It demanded justice. It demanded Priscilla's death. Every instinct urged Cedric to rip the chamber door from its hinges and end the betrayal that very moment. But Cedric was more than a warrior. He was a king. He had conquered kingdoms because he understood patience. If he killed Priscilla in secret, Lord Arthur would claim innocence, and the southern territories would erupt into civil war. No, the truth had to be revealed before the entire kingdom. Every noble, every alpha, every witness, the traitors would fall beneath the light of justice, not the shadows of revenge. Late that night, after Priscilla had finally fallen asleep, Cedric quietly put his plan into motion. Through an ancient hidden servants' passage, Tobias and Dr. Laker slipped inside the private chambers. Beyond a concealed wooden door, they discovered a horrifying sight. Cordelia lay chained to an old iron radiator. Her wrists were raw. Bruises covered her fragile body. Fresh wounds stained her torn clothing. She was barely alive. Working quickly and silently, Tobias shattered the chains. Together, he and Dr. Laker carefully wrapped Cordelia in warm blankets and carried her through the secret passageways beneath Wyvern Keep. No one saw them leave. They brought her into the king's heavily guarded underground vault, where no enemy could reach her. There, Dr. Laker immediately prepared an ancient purification draft. The rare antidote had been preserved for generations and was capable of cleansing dark magic from a victim's blood. Slowly, hour by hour, the poison began leaving Cordelia's body. Her breathing steadied. Color slowly returned to her pale cheeks. For the first time in many months, her inner wolf stirred peacefully instead of suffering beneath chains of dark magic. Above them, the kingdom slept peacefully, unaware that its future queen had vanished. By dawn, everything was ready. The stage had been set, not for a royal wedding, but for a royal... The Cathedral of St. Jude stood as one of the greatest masterpieces of medieval architecture. Towering stained glass windows filled the sacred hall with brilliant streams of colored light, while thousands of wolves from every corner of the kingdom gathered to witness the royal wedding. The air was heavy with incense and the powerful musk of the realm's strongest alphas. At the altar stood King Cedric. Dressed in ceremonial armor of black steel trimmed with gold, he looked every inch the legendary Apex Alpha. His expression revealed nothing. It was as cold and unyielding as carved stone. Then The cathedral doors slowly opened. A wave of admiration swept through the crowd. Priscilla entered the grand aisle wearing a magnificent gown woven from silver silk and white velvet. A diamond tiara rested upon her golden hair, while Lord Arthur proudly escorted her toward the altar. His face glowed with the satisfaction of a man who believed he had stolen a kingdom. Priscilla had drenched herself in Cordelia's stolen essence. The overwhelming fragrance of winter jasmine, crushed pine, and fresh rain surrounded her, leaving everyone convinced she truly was the kingdom's destined Luna. When they finally reached the altar, Lord Arthur proudly placed his daughter's hand toward the king. "My king," he declared, "I present my daughter, the fated Luna of Ethgard." Cedric never reached for her hand. Instead, he allowed it to fall. Silence spread across the cathedral. The high priest paused, still holding the silver binding cord, staring at the king in confusion. Cedric's voice echoed. The king's justice was swift, and it was merciless. Before the sun had fully set over Ethgard, the once powerful house of Hastings had fallen. Lord Arthur Hastings was stripped of every title he possessed. His lands, wealth, and authority were seized by the crown. Branded forever as a traitor to the kingdom, he was banished to the frozen wastelands of the Outer Rim, where countless exiles disappeared beneath endless snow. Priscilla's fate was even crueler. Still screaming in defiance, she was dragged away in heavy iron chains. She was thrown into the very same underground dungeons where she had imprisoned her own sister. There, she was sentenced to spend the rest of her life performing hard labor in the kingdom's silver mines. Every day would remind her of the cruelty she had inflicted upon the innocent. Justice had finally come full circle. Tobias was given one final command. He hunted down Mother Agatha, the disgraced witch was captured before she could flee the kingdom. For practicing forbidden blood alchemy against the crown and corrupting the sacred mate bond, she was publicly executed. With the conspirators defeated, peace slowly returned to Ethgard. That same evening, the Cathedral of St. Jude opened its doors once more. This time, not for deception, not for political ambition, but for destiny. Cordelia entered the cathedral wearing a breathtaking gown of midnight blue silk embroidered with delicate silver thread, the royal colors of the Northern Vales. Her silver blonde hair rested gently upon her shoulders. Her face still carried the softness of the woman who had endured unimaginable suffering. But her eyes no longer held fear. They held hope. For the first time in her life, she walked forward with dignity. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner, not as the forgotten twin, but as the true Luna of the kingdom. King Cedric waited patiently before the altar. When Cordelia reached him, he gently took her hands into his own. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only peace. The high priest completed the sacred ceremony beneath the blessing of the moon goddess. Then came the final ritual. Cedric slowly brushed a strand of silver hair away from Cordelia's face. Looking into her eyes, he whispered softly, "My soul has finally found its home." Cordelia smiled through tears. The king gently lowered his head. His fangs pierced the delicate skin of her neck. The claiming mark was complete. A brilliant wave of warmth surged through both of them. Their wolves howled together in perfect harmony. The sacred mate bond blazed with an unbreakable light. For the first time since fate had chosen them, both souls were finally whole. Cordelia gasped as strength flowed through every part of her body. The scars left by months of suffering no longer defined her. Her inner wolf rose proudly, stronger than ever before. Unable to hold back her emotions, she cried out, not in pain, but in overwhelming joy. Her joyful howl echoed across the snow-covered peaks of the Northern Vales, carrying the sound of freedom to every corner of the kingdom. The wolves gathered inside the cathedral lowered their heads in respect. They were no longer witnessing a royal ceremony. They were witnessing destiny itself. Priscilla had tried to steal her sister's scent. She had tried to steal her mate. She had tried to steal her crown. But destiny cannot be stolen. The threads woven by the moon goddess may be hidden. They may be delayed, but they can never be broken. The proud Alpha who believed she could deceive fate lost everything. The broken Omega who had lived in silence inherited an entire kingdom. And from that day forward, the story of King Cedric and Queen Cordelia became a legend told throughout the Northern Vales. A reminder that truth will always triumph over deception, and that no darkness can overcome a bond blessed by destiny.